Hi, my name is Fabio Medeiros. I will present a part of my doctoral research on the use of RPG in formal educational spaces, giving a focus to creating educational stories for younger children, from 4 to 10 years old. RPG has been extensively researched to be used in education, but the tendency is to use it for older children, mainly from 6th to 9th grade, and sometimes even for high school, although in lesser quantity. This is because commercial RPG tend to be aimed at this audience. They have the requirement to know how to read and write. Players need to read a very large book, have access to a lot of content that is written, write on the character sheet, create a little bit of their story, the character skills. And for much younger children, it gets a little more difficult because they are not used to this level of writing or even in this way of doing a laser activity. It gets a little more difficult. There are some things that we need to be aware of when dealing with this issue to serve younger children, but it can be a very interesting action. It involves many things that are in the daily lives of these children, and the activities they like to do, and we will be able to take a look at that. But first, let's define what is role-playing games. RPGs are role-playing games, and they mainly involve creating a story based on challenges that are proposed by the narrator or the game master to the other players. There are around 5 to 7 in average the number of players in a given situation of a role-playing game. One of them is the narrator, who creates the script and proposes it to the other players, who will play roles of characters within that story. So players end up having the roles of the protagonists in the game by making decisions about what will happen, and thus making the narrative progress according to what they consider important and relevant. The narrator's previous script serves mainly to create challenges, but the way of solving the challenges as the interactions within the game will how they will occur are determined mainly by the players themselves. RPGs have several characteristics that make this practice interesting to use in education. I'll highlight some points that make RPGs a good choice to be used as a practice in education, and I will briefly comment on each one. The first thing is the shared narratives that make RPG the moment to create collaborative stories. And everyone involved is caught up in what is happening, making decisions, being part of the story that is in evidence during the period in which the game is taking place. RPG has a rule system, something that is present in any game. This facilitates a lot, helps the participants to have a norm of conduct and interaction during the class space, during the moment of learning. When we define and present these rules, we are giving greater control to those who are inside and reaffirming their participation in what is happening more clearly since the beginning. The narrator previous script actually involves creating several challenges that will be solved by the players. These challenges may have everything to do with educational content that will be worked on, guided mainly by the teacher's intentionality. And these challenges promote the player's interest in the narrative. So when we define a challenge, we are showing students that they have something to solve and that they will need to develop, research, prepare, interact to overcome this demand. Cooperation is a very relevant point, because RPG is not a game in which those who are involved need to win over others. People work together, work as a team, to be able to solve the proposed challenges. It is a very interesting proposal to be dealt with education, even for us to try to look at this way of acting as possible and encourage it. Make it possible for players to think about the possibilities of conflict resolution, ways to overcome challenges that do not involve the competition. Another very important question is how much the players are immersed in the story. They imagine themselves living what is happening in the game. The players enter in such a strong way in the story that he feels like he's living it. This is decisive to be able to evoke a sensation and an experience of a character who is in another place, in another time. In this way, it's possible to take the players to know what was the life of native people before the Americas discovery, how were the first contacts with the Europeans who came, and how was this interaction. All this possibility of bringing such immersion through a game is quite different from just talking, just telling about what happened at the time. Imagine being able to bring to education an experience in Brazil at the time of discovery, in colonial Brazil, or in England in the Victorian era, even in the Industrial Revolution. We can plan didactic adventures so that players are immersed in each of these worlds. When we create a game, one of the main factors to be taken into account is the agency. Agency is the player's feeling when they realize that his actions in the game, his interactions, are decisive for the result of the game. The agency is this feeling that I have power, or what I do is relevant to the consequences, to what finally happens in the game. So this creates a positive spiral in which players are increasingly interested in what they are doing and want to make more interactions with the game. It is mandatory to think that the player's actions aren't just meaningless choices, especially on educational proposal with the use of games. These choices actually promote changes in what is happening in the game. The story in a RPG is entirely dependent of the actions the players choose to take. In education, research studies of role-playing games and education are a common practice since the 90s. There were academic productions about RPG, and there were commercial RPG books focused on education. And there is a strong criticism from previous times, and that persists until today, about how RPG is seen as and used as a final product that the teacher ends up using in a reproductive way. So he is getting the package ready to use without his own adaptations. And he's not interacting in a way that he feels like an author of what he is doing. And this is a very important factor for RPG. We can fall into the trap of ending up creating models that take away the authorship of the teacher, and it ends up not working because the teacher does not see himself as the owner of that. He does not understand what his role is, what is happening there. It's very important that we look at the use of RPG as a proposal that makes the teacher, when he's creating, proposing that he is using the tool as he knows it to be his proposal. That is very relevant. We are making him use the tool the way he wants, and not as we are imagining that education should be, as that proposal should be, like we are thinking. I'm going to talk now a little bit about the intention I have with the doctorate. The proposal is to train teachers to use RPG. Small groups will be formed like an RPG party, about 4 or 5 teachers in a 20-hour training. They will play RPG, learn about the system, and plan the first classes where they will use RPG later with their students. We will provide the material that is necessary. A lot will be built together with the teachers and the previous material that we are already preparing. Due to the pandemic, we had to rethink because the idea was to do it in person, but we don't know how it will be or even if this is a possibility now. We realize that some of these meetings are going to happen online. We also need to show how RPG can be done through online tools, online platforms like Discord, Roll20. We'll look at these as solutions as well, and that can be used in their classes, so that classes with RPG can be applied. The main objectives with the training are to help teachers to plan didactic RPG adventures, that they can mediate the game sessions with the learning, evaluate the learning from what happens during the game, give feedback on the student's performance as part of the game, and use the Comenius RPG, the rule system and setting that is proposed. Other systems will be addressed, their most important features to use for educational purposes. For teachers, this way teachers will be able to analyze and choose and how to use, how to create, so that we can look at RPG as a tool that the teacher will use as his own and be able to choose what to do during the game or even during the planning. We won't make him take our package and transport it literally to his class. The idea is that he'll build using tools that we will provide for him and that he can obtain on his own later. And then there's the question of how do we play the role-playing game with younger children? First, which game should I choose? There are some games that are more prepared, that give more possibility of use for smaller children or even for educational use. I will mention 4 games that have positive points for use in education and with children. Castle Falkenstein, which is a very narrative game. Players do not create a character sheet, but a diary. The rules are very subtle and well integrated into the game. The castle's proposal is in a world where famous fictional people live together with their own authors, a world in which fantasy and reality meet. It is geared towards the Victorian era in Europe, but we can adapt it to be used in Brazil, other places, or even other times. The system uses cards and not dice like most RPG games. The fact of using cards can be a positive one. They are very common in many homes here in Brazil. People often use cards to play, and children often live with it. So depending on the audience, the idea might be pleasing. They will use a hand of cards in the game, and different suits are more suitable for certain actions. Players can choose the number they will use by dealing the largest number for the situations they want to be more likely to succeed. Another game that I recommend using is the Mouse Guard. It is a wonderful game, beautiful as it is proposed. It was created from the comic books of the same name made by David Peterson. It is an extremely narrative game too, in the sense that the rules create movement for the game's narrative. The characters are anthropomorphic mice, and this calls attention to the children. They think they are cute, cuddly. The game proposes the idea that the protagonist mice in the story, the ones that are played by the players, are a guard of the mice community. They protect the community against various challenges, various conflicts. It may be the appearance of a snake, an eagle, but it can also be a heavy rain, snow, several problems that seem small. For mice they gain a very large proportion. It promotes the idea of conflict resolution in a non-violent way, making it possible for us to meet the challenges while maintaining our integrity, our moral values. There is a code of conduct to be part of the Mouse Guard, and this is very interesting to bring to the classroom. What I do to what extent here in the game is a rule that I cannot enforce, I cannot change. And as it involves overcoming, despite being small mice, the characters solve problems that seems gigantic. It is a phenomenal game. I recommend using it with children of all ages. When playing with smaller children, we have to look at the rules more and more lightly. For us not to whistle children with many rules, many guidelines, this will end up obstructing the main thing of the game, which is the experience they are having there. and might up ending getting lost in the middle of so much rules, so much information about what I have to do. However, sometimes we have to take what the children like and bring it to the classroom to give the child a reason to be more interested. I showed the Adventure Time RPG on a previous screen. Adventure Time is an animated series that is loved by the children, and it has a very interesting rule system. Adventure Time RPG's proposal helps to think about conflict resolution in a non-violent way. It has a lighter theme to use with younger children. It is already in their imagination, they know, and the rules are very easy. But in addition, there may be several things that children like and that we need to adapt. Cartoons like the Powerpuff Girls, Disney princesses, Gravity Falls, Ben 10, Pokemon, She-Ra, Harry Potter. The idea is to take what the child likes, be it a cartoon or a book, movie, and bring to the game a universe that they understand. So a generic RPG system like Savage Worlds, for example, is a good possibility. It is a unique way to interact with what she immediately likes. Savage Worlds has a simple rule system which is easy to learn, very intuitive, and during the game is very fast and dynamic. And at the same time, we'll give space to create a setting for the game that children already like, already know, which is part of their known universe. And for younger children, as younger as they are, the better we think about having a simpler narrative, a single rule that serves to the game progress. We must avoid several different rules. Sometimes it can happen that the child does not understand or don't see many solutions she can make. So it is interesting that we can create options for them, so that they can choose what is going to happen, what he is going to do. This way we can keep the action going. The most important thing is this experience, the movement, the thing happening. This is even more relevant than being consistent with the rules, so sobriety and coherence end up being secondary if the child is enjoying that moment and living it intensely. When the child is intense in her play, moments of play end up happening, moments of joy. They will jump, run, get up, laugh, scream. This is part of the game. It happens. This should be our goal. To want them to be all well behaved, to do exactly what the game's telling them to do is not the right way. One of the goals is for them to have fun, and at some point, something in the story might attract the children back to the plot again and draws attention to them to think that what they should do, how to resolve to leave that moment of joy, of play, for a most concentrated moment. The use of images together with texts are or in some cases replacing totally it, helps the child to better understand what is happening. Younger children do not know how to read and have a lesser capacity to abstraction. So if she is visualizing something, it will be much easier to understand. And the fact that she gets a sign, an insignia, and a prop that shows what skill or power she has helps a lot in that process. Remember the children playing with a piece of wood. Then one moment it is that piece of wood is a stroller, and another it can become a phone or even a lightsaber. In addition, there is also the question of us using our skills to move the game. We are telling a story so the children can perceive themselves in that different place. So sometimes it involves wearing a hat, a scarf, putting on a prop that makes the children recognize that this is another place. The child will see a little more for who the character is at the moment, the one character who you are playing. Throughout the story, you will play several different characters that they encounter. If you put on a scarf, they already know, oh, here comes Gru. This is important for us to think about how to identify that character that we are playing. Bear in mind that for younger children, it is better to think shorter games, shorter game sessions, because this will make the children keep their interest. Look at the game with interest. The very long sessions usually take away the interest of the child. He already starts looking at another point. In RPG, sometimes we happen to have sessions of 3 to 4 hours of play. That is not even possible in the educational environment. The idea is to make the story and so that the student, the player, wants to continue. He realizes that he can do something else later in another session. Think about personality characteristics. Think about how I speak, the diction, change the accent a little, the way of speaking, the voice, the intonation, for them to already recognize. Then write down the characteristic of the character you are playing, so that somehow they will realize later when they find again that it is that same character that is there at that moment. All of this to say, there are many ways for us to do role-playing games in the classroom with younger children. You can do it. It requires different preparation than preparing for young adults, but it is possible. So I'll tell now something about what I'm creating in the doctoral studies. As I was defining how I was going to do the RPG program process, I talked to my advisor to define some parameters. I participate in the research group EduMedia that created the game Comenius. This game is already in the third version of the digital game and has a whole expanded universe with board games, card games too. And I thought about what it would be like to use the game Comenius universe and bring it into the role-playing games. So we proposed to do this using what is already known from game Comenius. Of course, I had to adapt it to bring it to the stories. We were imagining a way to serve younger children, also using this tool. It was all taken into account while we created the concept. I speak in plural because I had the opportunity to have a colleague who is helping in the elaboration of the whole game. Maria Petrassi is the illustrator. All these illustrations that we will see from now on, even the one who is now with Comenius and the teacher Lourdinha, are already the versions adapted for the role-playing game that were created by Maria Petrassi. And not only the illustrations, but she's also participating in the creation and conception of the world and the characters that are there. We all talk and walk together to be able to identify how this world that is being designed from Comenius RPG will be. She has an Instagram and ArtStation if you want to see other works she creates. It is very interesting to see how the role of the illustrator in RPG is very relevant. Many are practically creators of the world together with the game designer. At Comenius RPG, we really had that experience to build together and see how it happens in a fluid way and with everyone's participation. Another person who is collaborating with me is Rafael de Lima. He is my student. I'm mentoring him so that he's creating an RPG adventure there for biology, who is the course he is taking. And then he has also been contributing ideas, but in his opinions that help point the way. The Comenius RPG is still being developed. The idea is that by December, at the most, we will have him ready to be able to offer to teachers and take teacher training courses so that they can use this material with their students as well as the beginning of the next year. Some points were crucial for development of the game. A rule that can be used for practically all the interactions of the game, a single rule, and a non-violent approach that sees ways of solving different conflicts, not only through violence. The main mechanics of the game will use a six-sided dice. Play and have to roll the dice and have to take 4 or more to be successful. Some conditions determined by the narrator can alter the outcome, or the ability of the characters as well can change that, to make it easier or more difficult. It is a very simple system, and dice rolls occur only in occasional situations, only when necessary. The skills and conditions are presented from text and image to the players. The younger the age, the more images so that he realizes what he needs to do. The system has no attributes, and there are 4 types of possible actions. The actions of agility, strength, mental, and social. All the characters are better in one, average in two, and weaker in the other. I'll talk a little bit about how the creation of these characters is carrying. There are 2 types of player characters: the teachers and the students. The teacher will choose his teaching practice and the kingdom where he resides. Pedagogical practice shows how he usually plans and runs his classes. It would be more or less like the schoolhouse from Hogwarts. This is the point that we have not yet worked on to create an accessible name. For now, it has the difficult name of the theory of each one, but we will work more to make it more palatable for use in the game. Another option of choice for the teachers is from which kingdom he came from. The kingdoms in Comenius define the areas of knowledge of the teachers, already arranged according to the BNCC, the Common National Curricular Base in Brazil. There are 5 areas. The BNCC is 4 plus early childhood education. The teacher will choose his area. He can even give a specialty. Say that he's a teacher from the field of nature, but he's from biology, or from the social area, but of philosophy. Or in the area of languages, it can be the physical education, Portuguese, or even other languages. So all of this is a specialty within one of those kingdoms. Kingdoms are places that exist in the world of game communities, where these people come from who deal with this area of knowledge more frequently. Then we will look at the later from now, we will look at the Comenius RPG roadmap. We have already defined the students in a way that they have more pleasant names for the children. We created 4 categories that were based on Gardner's multiple intelligences. And at the same time, we were feeding them into the Myers-Briggs personality test, that of the 16 personalities. We created these 4 great categories, which are analysts, sentinels, diplomats, and explorers. Each of them with the way they like to interact and what they like to do. Analysts like to understand, sentinels to protect, the diplomat to express himself, and explorers to know. And within each one, there are also different classes that show how the students interact with the world and with others. The first class of each of these lists is the most introspective, the focused on himself in contemplation. If it is more expensive and interacts more with others, it is the second class on each list. And if the student has a very strong ideal and most often interacts with from his perspective, his worldview, his class would be the third on the list. So these are basically the categories of the characters that go to the students. Character creation will vary according to the age of the children. The younger, the more easy it is necessary to make sure that students have help in order to make these choices. It is a little bit of the teacher's eye of offering options, showing images, what needs to be done to be defined. So all of these points to a way of building the character that already involves a little of the action, a little of the acting, and doing it within the story. It is not a character build that is disconnected from the rest of the game. While we are playing, in the beginning of the game, we start to define ourselves. These these illustrations are the teachers in game Comenius RPG. They are a model of what each of the teachers in each of the kingdoms would be like. The first one there is the teacher from the realm of language. Then the kingdom of early childhood education. Then the realm of mathematics. Then the social sciences and nature sciences is the last. So there are models of how the characters would be. Each one has its own way. You know a little bit of what the teachers and the people who live in each of those kingdoms are by seeing them, by just watching a little of his personalities, his features. Now we are going to see the students, the children. They are, in fact, they are normal when they are born. They are children like human beings like you and me. And as they go on resembling or liking, interacting more with doing things from a certain kingdom that are characteristic of that kingdom, they will assume in fact the form of people from that kingdom, and then even become a actual inhabitant of that world. For example, in social sciences here we have the evolution of the wolves. They are used to live in packs and like to live socially. They need this interaction. They are well used to live like this, so that we chose the wolf as an example, as a model of the characters that come from the kingdom of social sciences. But we could think of when choosing any we could think of choosing any anthropomorphic animal that has characteristics of life in community, in society, so it can become very characteristic. In each of the other kingdoms, they would be what happens as time goes by. They will change their shape so that the children will more resemble more the teacher or the inhabitants of that kingdom. I don't know if you have noticed, each of the each of the teachers had equipment that had artifacts in his hand. They are hand or they were wearing it. No? They are magical items that make that teacher manage to do things that other teachers would not be able to do. He magically manages to move people through space, through time. He can better understand what everyone's feeling, how he is expressing himself. He can protect people, he can change the scenery around him. to make people able to have the contact, the experience necessary to have a better learning. The research to define these artifacts was talking to teachers in each area, seeing how they imagined it, what they wanted if they could have an item that could magically solve the issue of teaching, which would be nice for you to have. It was an informal survey talking to teachers from different areas. This is the roadmap. The Comenius RPG world has its defined spaces, its kingdoms, and the school in the realm of early childhood education is that on the center. And this is all the map of the world, how it presents itself. At the center, the kingdom of early childhood education, with the toys that children are used to see, to use, the little ones mainly. And the school is there, the castle made with engineer blocks. Early childhood teachers take care of these children, showing a little bit about how possible interactions are as they grow up. And then they increasingly have contact with teachers from other kingdoms. At first, they go to the teachers go to them at the nursery school, and then take them to get to know a little bit of their kingdoms. And as this happens, they will interact more. They are perceiving themselves growing. The kingdom of languages is this cloud that is up there with castles on the cloud, because it is what makes everyone else communicate and interact in an understandable way. They are emissaries made with wings. They fly, they look angelic, as representatives of the Greek god Hermes. They were created inspired by the god Hermes, and that they take with them the idea of language, communication, transmitting information, transmitting knowledge from one side to the other. Remembering that these drawings were all made by Maria Petrassi, a colleague who is collaborating a lot with many of these ideas. Essentially, this is it. I appreciate the time you have been listening. The proposal for the doctorate is to put into practice from December or January. I have contact with some teachers and schools that have shown interest in doing it, but whoever is interested and wants to participate in some way, get in touch. My contacts on Instagram, email, and WhatsApp are on the screen. If you've always thought about using role-playing games in the classroom and wanted a help, get in touch. If you are a researcher who wants to know about role-playing games, or if you already know and use RPG and want to make it happen in your region to do this research with it, get in touch too, so that we can do this together, doing research in different cities and locations. I think we can have good results by doing this research in a more widespread way, especially because the classes will have few teachers. With the possibility of other people promoting these courses, we may be able to serve more people, make more people look at role-playing games as a powerful pedagogical tool and learn to use it in their practice. Gradually, we are able to make this change, make teachers start to take a different look at role-playing games and the games in general in education. Little by little, 5 teachers at a time, we will change their opinion. That's all, thanks.